Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Science Museum, the Science Museum's late event on cravings. I'm Dr Emily Grossman. I'm here to talk to you this evening about gut feelings. Now, I have a PhD in molecular biology and genetics, but I now work as a science communicator. And molecular biology and genetics, well, it's not really very much to do with gut bacteria, but I spend my time now explaining stuff to people. So, I wanted to talk to you tonight about gut bacteria, chocolate cravings, and poo, and whether there's a link between them. So, what could our gut bacteria have to do with whether we crave food like chocolate, sweets, cake? How's that related to poo? And what is the future in terms of our health? Could poo be ultimately used as an intervention to help with the obesity epidemic, or to help you stop craving something like chocolate? Now, no! Pretend you didn't see that. So as I said, this isn't my field, but I first became interested in the idea of what we call microbial mind control when a friend of mine told me a story about a year ago about a microbial protozoan called Toxoplasma gondii. This guy here, this is a cyst in a mouse brain full of Toxoplasma gondii. Now, Toxoplasma gondii is a protozoan, a small parasitic protozoan. It's the most common protozoan the third most common protozoan in humans. And it actually infects all warm-blooded creatures. It can infect all warm-blooded creatures, causing toxoplasmosis. Now, what's interesting about this is that although it can infect all warm-blooded creatures, it can only reproduce, its sexual life cycle can only continue in a cat. So, what does this mean? What it means is that when it infects a rat, what it actually does is it makes a rat do this. It makes a rat not afraid of cat. So in other words, rats go up to cats. Usually they are, rats are biologically programmed to be frightened of the smell of cat urine, which is why they run away from cats. But this parasite, when it infects the rat's brain, it stops the rats from being afraid of cats. Not only that, they actually get sexually aroused at the smell. Now, when my friend told me this, I was just like, this is ridiculous. This parasite is controlling the rat's brain to make it basically get eaten at the expense of the rat, so that it can complete its sexual life cycle, which, in order to do that, it needs to get inside the cat. So basically, the rat goes and says hi to the cat eats the rat, and then the parasite gets into the cat, finishes its reproductive life cycle, it's happy, but the rat isn't. So I was like, oh my god, it's controlling its brain and effectively making them die. And then the same friend said to me, well, actually, this happens with, potentially happens in humans too. And I was like, whoa, really? Like bacteria and bugs can control us? Okay, fine. So I did a bit of research into it, and then it just so happened that I heard about there was going to be an event here tonight on cravings. And I kind of put a couple of threads together by that point. I thought, aha, okay, so I'm going to look into this and work out what the story is so far about what we know about parasitic mind control and microbial mind control when it comes to humans. And can microbes in humans not only control their minds, but then by doing that, control their behaviour, our behaviour, and by doing that, control what we eat, which is basically why we're all here, right? Because we're all here for an event on cravings. So, can they affect our behaviour in the same way as they affect rats? Obviously, they're not going to stop us being scared of cats, but other ways. So the idea is, okay, we're all here because we all are interested in cravings. We crave stuff, people crave crave food. And we crave food, we all know that leads to overeating, we all know that there's obesity epidemics globally, and we all know that overeating is unhealthy. It can lead to, obviously, obesity, it can lead to sleep apnea, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancer, but we still do it. A lot of people still do it. Why? So the common phrase around this is, I'm going the wrong way. The computer's very far away. Okay, so the common phrase around this is, can't you just control yourself? Can't you just not eat that extra bit of chocolate, that extra bit of cake? Well, studies have actually been done to show that it may actually not be under our control. The addiction to food or a craving, it may seem like another type of addiction, but actually it's been shown to be very different to addictions, for example, to alcohol or to drugs. It actually affects our brain in a different way, and you can tell that because we don't get habituation. In other words, the more you eat, you don't then get less and less stimulated and excited by the taste of cake. In fact, sometimes even more so. It's not like when you drink and it's then harder and harder to get drunk, or same with drugs. So it doesn't show habituation, which implies it's got a different underlying mechanism to the kind of addictions that are with drugs and alcohol. So this food addiction, it may not actually be a simple matter of trying to control it, trying to say, why can't you just stop? So in which case, what could it be? Now, this is where these guys come in. So these are obviously our gut bacteria. Now, it's becoming quite a big thing, so people probably know more and more about this now. When I first started researching this, I had no idea that we have 30, around 36 trillion cells in our body, of our own. Anyone got any vague idea how many bacterial cells we have in our body? About the same? It's actually twice as many. Well, estimations around 100 trillion bacterial cells, mostly bacteria, some other microbes, but mostly bacterial cells in our body. And most of those are in our gut. Now, yes. Our gut bacteria are a good thing. We all hear about friendly bacteria, yeah, they're great for us. And they sit in there and they actually do a good job for us. They help us digest our food, they protect us from nasty bacteria, mostly by just getting in the way, so they compete for nutrients, so all the nasty bugs don't come along. And we all know about drinking probiotics and that this is supposed to be good for you, but it's not really clear yet exactly how those things work. But the fact is we've got effectively this whole other organ inside our bodies, in our bellies. And they're living alongside us sort of mutualistically, giving us support, we give them food, obviously, they look after us. But it's actually thought that it may not just be that we're living in harmony. They may actually, because there's so many of them, they may actually be trying to boost their own survival at our expense at times. Not only do they outnumber us in number by 10 to 1, in terms of genes, they actually outnumber us by 100 to 1. So really, they're the main organ, and we're just kind of they're just hijacking us as a sort of taxi. And they, therefore, may be controlling us in order for them to live, even if it's at the expense of our health. How could they be doing that? Well, what do they want? What do all living organisms want? They want food. They want food, and they want the food that they want. They want lots of it, which may be where the cravings come in the first place, and they could potentially, specifically, want the foods that they require. Because, of course, they're not just competing with us, but they're also competing with each other. There's loads and loads and loads of different species of bacteria in our guts. And the more they can outcompete each other, the more then they will thrive. So, so there are different types of gut bacteria. And interestingly, some of them thrive more on different types of nutrients. So for example, these guys, which are called Parasites, they prefer carbohydrates. So when we eat potatoes, rice, pasta, these guys thrive. And then they can outcompete their other bacterial buddies and grow and survive, and that's what they want. So maybe they make us crave potatoes and fat. Potatoes and starch. These guys, Bacteroidetes, they prefer fat. So those of us who crave cake, maybe it's those. And these guys, Bifidobacteria, they actually have a competitive advantage when we eat fibre. So that's probably a good thing. They make us crave fibre. So all of this is kind of speculative in the sense that this is all very new research, and the fact that we've even got these different bacteria which grow on different nutrients is actually relatively kind of new data. Now, not only that, but there are also some very specialist type of bacteria that have been found in people's guts. For example, in Japan, what's this? Seaweed. In Japanese people, bacteria have been isolated from their guts that are actually preferentially grow on seaweed. Now, is it cause or effect? Are they in there because Japanese people eat more seaweed, or are they causing them to crave seaweed? Not totally clear, but it's certainly there. And in African children who eat sorghum, which is high in cellulose, they have a specialised type of bacteria in their guts that helps to break down the cellulose. So these have evolved alongside the diets of these people. Now, so the fact is these bacteria exist, but is it cause or effect? Are they just happen to be there because we're eating certain types of food, or could it actually be having an effect on causing us to eat these kinds of foods, or just causing us to eat full stop so that they survive? In other words, could they be controlling our minds like they're controlling the minds of the rats, making them get eaten by the cats? Now, a link between our gut and our brain has been known for a long time. I mean, we've always spoken about gut feelings. Trust your gut. It's out there, this kind of conceptual idea between what's going on in here, informing our thoughts, our decisions. But could that be biologically true? Could it actually affect our mind? Could it affect our behaviour? Could it affect what we do? So, is there a symbiotic relationship, basically, between the gut bacteria, the bacteria that live in it, and our brain? So, I looked into the research that's been done, the studies that have been done on this. And the first thing to say is that it's found that people with chronic intestinal conditions, tend to have a higher incidence of psychological disturbances. So, again, cause or effect, don't know yet, but there is definitely a relationship. 80% of people with IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, have increased levels of anxiety and depression. Again, a link between the gut and how we feel. And people with autism also tend to have abnormal levels of gut bacteria. Either more or less diverse gut bacteria, or just higher levels of different types of gut bacteria. So could it be that actually the gut bacteria in us are actually feeding upwards and affecting our behaviour, our feelings, our depression, our anxieties, our psychological issues? And could that ultimately be leading us to crave food? So in order to study this, it's important to know what scientists can do in order to change the gut bacteria. Now, luckily, or perhaps unluckily, gut bacteria can be changed very, very easily and very, very quickly. Prebiotics. Prebiotics are things that you ingest, and they make the right conditions in our body for certain bacteria to grow, and that will then enhance the population of those bacteria in our guts. And our bacteria in our guts can change within 24 hours. It's a really evolving kind of like microsystem inside of us. So prebiotics, we've all heard of probiotics. Again, those can have an effect within 24 hours and actually change gut bacteria populations. Generally, that's adding in extra bacteria, so that will be increasing diversity. And the current understanding is that the more diverse our gut bacteria are, the more they'll compete with each other, and the less likely they are to have resources left over to then influence and affect our behaviour. So what we're really looking at, the key here is diversity. Now, antibiotics, obviously, we all know that too many antibiotics can affect us, but also can affect our gut bacteria and can affect our ability to then fight off other diseases. Diet can change our gut bacteria, and again, very quickly. So again, is it cause or effect? If we eat seaweed, will we get more seaweed gut bacteria, or is it there that's craving it? But there's definitely a symbiotic relationship between it that's been shown. And last, come back to this, fecal transplants. Hold this thought, I'm going to come back to it, otherwise we're just going to go off on a tangent, but let's just leave it there for a moment. Basically, we're looking at poo. Can we change our gut bacteria? Yes, we can, by ingesting or putting into someone else or an animal someone else's poo. Yes, and these are the studies. So this is how you change the bugs. So by changing the bugs, these are the studies. First of all, some studies were done on mice. So the first mice studies were done by taking some normal mice and putting them in a dark box that was attached to a very bright open area. And they would run around, and they would be quite adventurous. They would run out into the open area and explore everywhere. These are normal mice. If you then took a timid mouse, and it did a poo, and you gave its poo, mice eat each other's droppings, so this isn't that weird. You give its poo to an adventurous mouse, and it becomes timid. It stays in its dark little cage, and it doesn't explore the outside world nearly so much by eating the adventurous mouse's poo. And by eating the timid mouse's poo. And it works the other way around too. So if you give a timid mouse the poo from an adventurous mouse, it will then become more adventurous and go and explore in its like bright open cage rather than staying in the little dark area. Crazy stuff. The next study that was done on mouse is giving mice probiotic drinks, just like we take probiotics. And when mice are given probiotic drinks, it reduces their stress hormones. They get less stressed. Not only that, but when they're put in a cylinder full of water, mice swim. Generally, they tend to tire out quite quickly. But if you give them probiotics, they get what scientists call more dogged. They can swim for longer. I know. Doesn't mean they're like a dog, but I guess they do doggy paddle. So it's described as being more doggy. So again, when they're given these extra gut bacteria, making their own gut bacteria more diverse, then they're less stressed and they're more kind of resilient. Okay, so another study on autistic mice. Now, how do you know a mouse is autistic? There is a reason. What they do, autistic mice do two things. First of all, they show compulsive behaviour. So mice, if you give mice a marble, they will bury it in sawdust. An autistic mouse will dig it up and bury it and dig it up and bury it and dig it up and bury it for a long time. Not only that, but they also show reduced communication. So they communicate less frequently, and they're more quiet, and they don't. It's less frequent and quieter kind of mouse noises. You can't actually hear them; they're ultrasonic, but you can measure them using an ultrasonic detector. If you give these autistic mice applesauce laced with probiotic gut bacteria, then they stop their compulsive behaviour and they go back to normal communication skills. So again, these gut bacteria are really having an effect on the brains. So what about in humans? Limited numbers of studies have been done. One study gave a sample of women probiotic drinks with gut bacteria in them, and they found that actually, no, it was a mixed study from women and men, this one, and they found that the probiotics actually increased people's moods, particularly in those who were the lowest mood to begin with, so who were the sort of feeling the most low. It actually made them happy in this one study. In another study, which is funded by Danone, this was women, they gave 12 women a milk drink which was laced with 5 different strains of bacteria, and they gave them twice a day for 4 weeks, and they studied them over the course of this time. And then at the end of this time, they showed these women pictures of angry faces and scared faces. And what they found, they then did a brain scan, and what they found is that the women who had had the probiotics compared to those who hadn't, the control group, actually had less brain response to scary and angry faces. In other words, their stress response to fear and anger was reduced because of having these gut bacteria, at least that's the implication. So, the next thing to think about is that, okay, so if they are controlling our minds, could this mind control then actually end up causing us to crave particular foods? Could they be controlling our mind, making us think we want food, and then actually affecting our behaviour, making us go to the fridge in the middle of the night and eat some cake? So again, back to my studies. It is found that if you take a normal mouse and an obese mouse, and again, mice eat each other's droppings. If you take a poo sample dropping from an obese mouse and give it to a normal mouse, it gets obese. So there is a link between gut bacteria and obesity. Not only that, but if you take this, they have done twin studies on twins where one twin is obese and one isn't. And if you give the obese twins gut bacteria in the form of their poo to a mouse, that mouse will also become obese. Crazy. So the idea is that potentially in the future, we could be using poo transplants to help solve people with obesity problems. I know, we're not there yet, but it's certainly been shown to be possible in mice. Okay, so there's definitely a link with eating. There's definitely a link with eating and a link with overeating. And we've seen how it could be through effects on the brain and effects on the thoughts of these people. So another study in humans, again this time to do with obesity, is that people were given a probiotic drink, and it was shown, this was just one study, giving people a probiotic drink showed to lead to reduced weight gain in one study in humans. So this is obviously kind of really like potentially really big, important stuff. If we can deal with overeating and obesity using probiotics, that's pretty cool stuff. Another study in the States showed they studied 120,000 nurses, not sure why nurses, but I guess they're in a hospital, and they gave them all sorts of different foods over a period of time, and they found that the food that was most likely to be linked to reduced weight gain, so not specifically weight loss, but just less weight gain, was yogurt. Again, containing gut bacteria, probiotics. So there's here we, a link in here with obesity with eating habits. No, don't do that. Okay. Okay, don't do that. Oh no. Ah, we go. Okay, so the next question to think about then is, okay, they're making us crave food. Perhaps they're making us crave so that we overeat. But are they causing us to overeat specific things? So we saw before that different gut bacteria thrive on different types of nutrients, but could they be actually making us eat those particular types of nutrients in order for them to thrive? So could they be specific bacteria causing us to crave fat, or hamburgers, pizzas, or sweet stuff? Now, there is one study, it's quite circumstantial evidence, however, there is one study that does link gut bacteria to craving chocolate. And it's this. It's quite tenuous, but more needs to be done. But it was shown that they took a study of chocolate cravers and chocolate indifferenters, people who didn't really care, which, I'll come back to that, but chocolate cravers and chocolate indifferenters, people who are indifferent to it. And they fed them an identical diet for a period of time, so they were actually eating the same stuff. And then they checked the metabolites in their pee, in their urine. And they actually found that these two groups of people had different microbial or bacterial metabolites in their urine, even though they'd been eating the same food. So there is a link, and again, cause and effect is indirect at this stage, but there is a link between whether you crave chocolate and the type of bacteria you have in your gut. Now, this leads us on to say, okay, so if they're controlling us, how do they control us? How could they be doing this? And there's basically fundamentally two ways they could be doing this. It could be to do with the chemicals that they release. So bacteria, like everything, they release waste products, metabolites, into our blood, circulate in our blood, could go right up to the brain and cause changes in the brain that way. Or, the other thing that they could do is that they could hijack our nervous system. Now, there is a huge long nerve called the vagus nerve that runs from the lining of the gut up to the brain, and it has about 100 million other little nerve endings coming off at the enteric nervous system in the gut. And it's thought that the bacteria could actually hijack that system and send signals to our brain directly. So they're literally talking to our brain up this nerve and sending chemicals round our blood up to our brain as well. Now, how could these chemicals then control us? So, let's go backwards again. So we already saw that they could affect our mood. Anxiety, depression, feelings of unhappiness. And one theory is that they could cause dysphoria, feeling of unhappiness or sadness or feeling uncomfortable, until we eat the food that they need in order to survive and thrive. One study that has evidence of this is a study on babies, where they look at babies with colic, and they found that babies with colic, they will cry uncontrollably until you feed them. And that feeding is then linked to increased weight gain, and they don't actually need increased weight, but they are crying, and they have abnormal levels of gut bacteria. So it could be that the gut bacteria are making them feel unhappy so that they cry, so that they get fed. And then the gut bacteria are happy because they get their yummy food in the milk. Another way in which they could affect us is actually directly through our taste receptors. So gut bacteria have been shown to have an effect on the taste receptors, both in our tongue and also in the lining of our gut. There's actual taste receptors in there. And mouse studies have shown that mice with no gut bacteria actually have different cravings or eat different things to mice with gut bacteria. So, for example, mice with no gut bacteria will have more sweet taste receptors on their tongues, and they will eat more sweet food when they've got no gut bacteria. Also, people who've had gastric bypass surgery, which reduces or changes the diversity of gut bacteria, they have also been found to have different levels of receptors, taste receptors, in their gut lining, potentially as a result of the changes in their gut bacteria. So it could be that the gut bacteria are affecting our taste receptors and making us crave different food through the fact that we like the taste of it more. A third way in which they can affect us is through hormones. And now, over 50% of the dopamine in our bodies, happy hormones, comes from our gut. And gut bacteria have actually been shown to be able to produce a version of dopamine that's very, very, very similar to our own dopamine. Most of our serotonin is actually produced in the gut as well. Not only that, but it's been shown that gut bacteria can also produce chemicals that are super, super similar to our hunger hormones, the hormones that regulate hunger and satiety, that feeling of being full up, which are leptin and ghrelin. And these hunger hormones, mice with different levels of gut bacteria have actually been shown to have differing levels of their own hunger hormones, their own versions of leptin and ghrelin. So it could be that the gut bacteria are making us more hungry or making us less aware of when we're full up, regulating the full up feeling. So, as an aside, before we sort of round up and say, what does this mean? One really cool thing that I found out is that it is possible that our gut bacteria are actually contagious. Now, what do I mean by that? Families cohabiting are found to have similar types of gut bacteria in their guts. Two theories as to how this could be, probably both of them, is that people who live together eat similar types of food, so if one person craves a certain type of food, that will cause the household to eat that food, and those gut bacteria, it's a kind of positive feedback loop, then those people will become more similar in terms of their gut bacteria. In fact, it was found in a study that of 12,000 people, that people are 57% more likely to become obese if their friend is also obese. Now that was thought to be a social reason, but it's actually now thought that it could be because their gut bacteria are becoming more similar, and they're becoming more like the obese friend's gut bacteria, so in other words, less diverse. And it's actually thought that it could be not just that a knock-on effect of what food you eat, but that they could actually be passed on, contagious, like actually through body, and in the same way as we pass on a cold, that we could actually be passing on our gut bacteria to the people in our immediate vicinity. So I could be passing on my craving of crisps to people who live in my house. So what is the implication of all of this stuff? So the fact is, there are a lot of studies that show that there are links. What do we do about it, and what's the future? Do we have a future where we can control an obesity epidemic or control our chocolate cravings by changing our gut bacteria? And what it all comes down to is poo. So I said I'd come back to it. Is poo the future? Well, it's certainly been the past. In the 4th century in China, according to medical literature, they were using poo to actually cure food poisoning and severe diarrhea. They would give people drinks with poo in it. In the 1500s, people were given yellow soup, which was fecal matter in water, which helped with abdominal diseases. So this is not new stuff. And the Bedouins used poo from cows to cure bacterial dysentery. And that was actually proven in the Second World War when German soldiers in Africa did exactly the same. They ate camel poo and it helped them with their dysentery. So this isn't new stuff. But in 1958, the first fecal microbial transfer was carried out to help with colitis. And it was actually found to be successful in helping people with severe colitis. And in fact, since then, it's become almost routine use for infections with Clostridium difficile, which is a severe kind of gastrointestinal bug. And it's treated by giving fecal microbial transfer. So basically, transferring poo from one person who is healthy to a person lacking the normal levels of gut bacteria. And that's done usually by using a colonoscopy, using a nasoduodenal tube, or by a gastric duodenal tube, basically nasogastric tube, basically a tube going from your nose into your stomach or into your intestine, or going up the other way using people's poo. There are possibilities of doing it in a tablet, which is obviously a far more preferred form, but mostly it's been carried out so far using these methods. And it's been very successful. And in fact, just a couple of years ago, the FDA in America regulated the experimental use of poo as an experimental drug. And since then, it's been used experimentally to investigate constipation, IBS, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, and actually also to look at potential use as poo transplants to help people with obesity, diabetes, and rheumatoid arthritis. So is poo the future? It could quite possibly be so. And the fact is that our gut bacteria seem to be intricately related to how we think, to how we feel, to our health, and perhaps doing more research into this stuff, which is what's going on across the board everywhere at the moment, could potentially be hugely, hugely beneficial in helping us with our health in the future. So I'm just going to leave you with the idea, always trust your gut. It knows what your head hasn't figured out yet, because the little people in there are actually controlling us. I've got a reference down here which has got all of the papers that I referred to.